gonna be so fast. Oh, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. All right. See if the Graham is going to cooperate today. What's the chances Graham is going to work? Fitty.
Slimmage.
Oh.
It did.
Let's go.
All right, 2 weeks in a row. That's my thought was it worked last week, so I don't have high hopes for this week.
We're on a streak, bro. We're on a streak. All right, let me get over here to Facebook and do the little share thing. And I think I forgot last week to do Twitter or X. I mean,
oh yeah,
I think so. I'll make sure I get over there and do that. We were I feel like we were a little crunch for time last week or something, maybe.
Yeah.
Was that what it was?
Well, it was like I don't know. It was like a game of 21. It wasn't really a time clock. It was just when we were done, we were done.
Tip to 12.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Tip to 12. All right, let's see here. Okay, let me. I went down a rabbit hole the other day because I just made some kind of a noise in the microphone, and I went down the rabbit hole of the ASMR stuff.
No way. Did you?
Like it's so painful.
Yeah.
But you can't. It's like you just can't turn away from it.
You cannot turn away. It's dumb, isn't it?
All right, let me get over here to X. Is it weird that I keep calling it Twitter?
I think it's still Twitter. I think the majority of people still call it Twitter.
Right? Like, I mean, I get it and all, but it's just Twitter, bro.
It's like, Elon, look, bro. You can get rid of all the stuff and all the waste. But don't waste your time unnecessarily changing stuff that doesn't need to be changed. It's Twitter.
I'm thinking, Ken, I'm thinking of starting a ministry in our church.
Okay.
Called DOSE.
DOSE.
Department of Church Efficiency.
DOSE. You should put like an accent, a Q at the end of it and make it DOTSE. DOTSE.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then you could do it you could do it like in a French voice. And so when somebody's really, really mad and they're like, what did you do? And you you've been DOTSE.
My question is, are people going to get triggered? Are people going to get triggered by that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it is triggering. I mean, that's the point. Like, how would you say it in French? Say like in French, you said you've been DOTSE. Go have some coffee. You've been DOTSE.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pepe Le Pew has entered the conversation.
You thought you had money? No, you don't. See, I'm almost like Pepe Le Pew and Speedy Gonzalez.
Yeah. It's like Mel Blanc got confused in the middle of his deal and started doing the wrong voice.
I think of like the Pink Panther. You're so crazy. Yeah, you're so crazy. You don't know what you're talking. See, now I'm back to him. I think I like Speedy Gonzalez better.
That is hilarious.
So if you did that, you'd have to be like, you've been DOTSE, bro.
That's funny. It was Mel Blanc, wasn't it? Or Mel Blanc?
Mel
Blanc? Wasn't that his name? No, no, no. Mel Brooks is Spaceballs or whatever. Blazing Saddles.
Mel Blanc.
Blockade.
Mel Blanche. Mel Blanche. Oh,
Oh
look here.
man. Yeah, what is it?
Look here.
What we got?
Marijuana. ISL marijuana. Marijuana.
Oh, oui, oui.
Je peux
Yes,
penser un
sir.
peu. Je peux penser un
Maracuin.
peu, marijuana. Is it frère? Marijuana? Marijuana? Marijuana.
Look at him just dropping the French. My goodness. That is awesome. Mel Blanc. Yeah, Mel Blanc. Some of the great voices. Definitely not Mel Brooks.
No. But
Although he's got some great BC. He's got some great lines. I'm just gonna say.
Frank Caliendo. I love when Frank Caliendo does George W. Bush telling a joke. And he's like,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he gets it.
Right. Right. That's right. Oh, that's so funny. All right, we're shared out. You want to give us a weather report? Ladies and gentlemen, the Mobilized Church weather forecast, Mobilized Church podcast weather forecast on the fives. Ken Dillingham, our chief meteorologist.
We're checking in with Ken Bistarkey. He says it's 28 degrees with a high of 35 in North Rast, Ohio. Up there with all the Rasmussens. I read it the way it comes off of the ticker.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's your job.
That's it. That's it. Yeah. Telemundo teleprompter. Back to Speedy Gonzalez.
Yeah, we're praying for all the folks in North Rast, Ohio. It's going good. It is cold. It's a cold out there. I had the thought this morning.
Ken Rasmussen.
There we go.
Yeah.
As Grandma used to say, Ken, it's a cold woolly booger out there.
It is.
Whatever that means.
Who wants a woolly burger? That's all I'm.
I bet ISR Mataquini is thinking, what in the world have I gotten into today?
Yeah,
They probably
I don't even know. Yeah, I don't even know what I done. Yeah.
So, okay, dokie. I think we're good to go. Hey, do us a favor, get the word out. Hit the share button. Let's see. We're live on all the platforms, and I have not yet, Ken. I've not yet done it.
Are you going to do it?
I'm going to try to figure out if we can figure out the TikTok thing.
Let's do it, man.
Send the letter and see if we can.
Let's do it.
See if we can make that happen.
Let's pump this thing right into China. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, might as well, right?
Yeah.
Might as well.
That tune would be the tune from the Disney song. Dun, 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 dun.
That's exactly right. For real.
That's all Siamese, though. Remember the Siamese cats?
Siamese,
we are Siamese, if you please.
We got Mel Blanc on the show today, man. We had Speedy Gonzalez, the Siamese cats. What cartoon was that? What animated?
I don't know. Then they turn around and say, "We're Siamese if you don't please." Like,
I mean, they're cats. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they don't care.
I don't care.
They don't care. And yeah, we don't want to go down the road of offending all the cats. Somebody help us out in the chat. What Disney animated movie is?
Yeah.
Do we get the infamous song?
The
Siamese Cats. Oof. I don't know that one. I mean, I know the song, but I don't know the movie. I don't think I've ever seen it. So
that's right.
Okay. Yeah.
And the 8th of the 7 dwarfs, the newest one, Woolly Booger. Sleepy, Booger. Dopey, and Woolly Booger.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, we're gonna get rolling. It is 10:28, and we're gonna get rocking and rolling here today. It's gonna be a
Let's
good one,
rock.
Ken. It's gonna be a good one.
It actually is. We actually have some good stuff to talk about.
There we go. Kelly Matheny, Lady
Ah,
and the Tramp.
that was Lady and the Tramp. Oh my word! That's the story of me and Stephanie. This is me and my wife, Lady and the Tramp. There we are.
Can I just tell you something?
I want you to.
Never seen. I don't know that I've ever seen 30 seconds of Lady and the Tramp. Well, I
Oh,
probably
you've
have.
missed
Like,
it.
there's
You've
probably,
missed it.
you see there's like a commercial or something like that, but I don't know that I've
I've seen
intentionally
the old one.
watched 30 seconds.
I've
Is there
seen
a
the
new
old
one?
one. I think there's an upverted, upvert,
Converted,
subvert. You could subvert something, so I guess you could upvert it too.
right? The opposite
Subvert,
of subvert.
upvert it.
He just created a new word. That is amazing.
Wouldn't it be funny if that was like a subconscious, like Freudian thing? Like,
Upvert. All right, here we go. We're gonna do a 3, 2, 1 and get rocking and rolling. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mobilized Church Podcast. This is Chris Dillingham alongside my big brother Ken Dillingham Jr. the Third on this chilly Tuesday morning, the day after the greatest sporting event there is, to me, equals probably like better than Christmas, March Madness, Final Four championship game. Any thoughts from last night's game?
Yeah, listen, what a game, bro!
What a game!
And the thing is that what's so cool is you finish on the game's on Monday, you finish on Tuesday, you catch your breath, go watch One Shining Moment again, and then Wednesday go to the Masters and watch the par 3.
Bro.
I mean, you talk about the 12 days of Christmas.
Think about that. You go straight from March Madness straight into the Masters. Like it just literally cannot get any better than that. Plus, Kelvin Sampson lost, so it really is a bonus. It's an added bonus.
It's a bonus. Oh my golly!
Oh man, see if we can offend all the Houston people right out of the gate. Yeah, there's some history there. There's some, my Illinois roots did some stuff back in the day. I just have a hard time pulling for the guy, But I tell you what, brutal scene, man. The poor dude, Sharp. Two turnovers in the last minute, and like that last shot, that's not his fault.
No,
they were running the elevator play and they didn't close the doors, and the guys were in the wrong spot.
Well, and who was it that came out on him? It was
it was Walter Clayton Jr. or Clayton Walton Jr. Clayton, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Clayton
John.
Walton.
It was John Boy. He with the Waltons. The thing about it
Walter
was
Clayton Jr. There we go.
Yeah. The crazy thing about it is when he recognized where he was. This is so funny because so when Houston beat Duke, I said, it's so weird. I said, because he's got it's almost like a set shot. Like he shoots from almost like below his chin. So he has a really low release.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So I mentioned that early in the game, and I think it's the reason why he couldn't get the shot off.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that.
I mean, Clayton comes flying. I mean, the fact that he recognizes where he's at. I mean, if he loses him for 1 second more, he does get the shot off, and it could be a totally different outcome.
Well, and he had blocked a 3-point. Clayton had blocked a 3-point earlier in the game.
That's exactly right.
And so I'm sure that probably was in a little bit of his head because Sharp can shoot, dude. That dude is an amazing shooter against Duke.
Yeah,
he was out of his mind. So, you see that. You see the emotion after the game. I guess he just sat in the same spot for like 10 minutes, didn't hardly move and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a brutal thing, man. Sports is cruel, but, lived up to the hype. It was a great game, and it just shows, man. I think I saw Florida led for what, 1 minute and 3 seconds?
Yeah.
Is that what it was? 1 minute and
Yep.
3 seconds the whole game, but
Yep.
they're national champions, so great tournament, and now we flip the page to the Masters, and man, who doesn't love the Masters, bro?
I mean, the one thinking of the par three. I mean, what would be your memory, like the number one thing you think of when you think of the par three, the Masters par three tournament? What's something you think about?
The skip across the pond.
True.
That's what I always see.
So I thought of two things.
Okay.
Tony Finau's hole in one and then twisted ankle.
Oh, no, not twisted ankle.
Like out of
He dislocated his ankle, bro, and then popped that bad boy back into place and still golfed.
And he was like in the top of the leaderboard during the the actual tournament.
That was one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life.
I knew you're either going to pick that or the skip across hole in one.
That to me is the greatest shot I've ever seen. I don't care what you say. That's the greatest shot. I mean, to skip it across and it goes up high, comes back around, and comes right back down in the hole. Absolutely.
Was that Rory or Rahm? Who was that?
No, I think it was, oh man, it was some lesser known guy. Like it was a known guy, but it wasn't one of those top guys like that. Can't remember. Maybe somebody could check it out and let us know. So it is a holiday week, man. Holiday week with Masters. So it's going to be a good time. So we appreciate everybody jumping on today, being a part of the conversation. It's going to be a great one. And France has checked in today, Ken. Start off a little Pepe Le Pew. We had a little France visitor on YouTube, so we welcome all the way from France. So, all right, you ready to jump in today?
I am so ready.
If we let that go too long, then it turns into Speedy Gonzalez. So you did good. You kept it right there. I know. That line.
It had to be a quick deal, because if I keep on going in it, then it slides over. All of a sudden, he flies from France to Cancun in about 3 seconds.
That's exactly right. For real. All right. So today's going to be a really, really good conversation. It's going to be something relevant. So, one of the things that we like to do, Ken, on the podcast, again, I hate to reference this all the time, but like, when the person asks us, like, what are you guys going to talk about after you talked about your discipleship thing, whatever?
Yeah.
Like all of it's discipleship. And, we try to talk about like the principles of, making disciples, building a discipleship culture in the church, being a disciple, different aspects and components that people deal with of being a disciple. So we try to have like we run the full gamut, whatever a gamut is.
Yes. The gamut has been run before.
We don't do a lot of running.
We'll run that gamut.
The gamut, we run it hard, bro. And so we've run it.
I'll tell you one thing I'll never do.
What's that?
I did a rod.
There you go. For real.
Like, speaking of running stuff,
that was probably one of the most random things we've ever had on the podcast. I did a ride. For real. So we're not going to do that. No. So today is going to be like a very practical thing, I think, for everybody. And so I'll just kind of read the description, and then I'm going to let you just launch us and get it kicked off. All right.
Sounds good.
So today what we'll talk about is wrestling through this tension, right? Of if I'm serving God, shouldn't life go better? Right. So what we're going to explore today is what faith really is, what lies at the center of it, and why our motivation to follow Jesus must go deeper than just the blessings we hope for. Right. So when things don't go our way, how do we stay anchored? So as a believer, a follower of Jesus, there's this constant tension that we deal with, Ken, of knowing, like, if God wanted to, he could do this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we have that faith, and we believe that he can do things that does make our life better. But then the reality is, it doesn't always go that way. And so wrestling through what that
Mm.
tension is, and I think, and what we really want to get to the heart of it, I'm not gonna like jump the whole show to the punchline, but like I think it really gets to the heart of, like, what is our faith perspective and understanding of, like, why we really serve Jesus. So
Yeah.
get us launched off in this, and I think we definitely want to hear from people today, because I think this would be a good opportunity, Ken, for people to
Would.
comment and share with us, experiences, things that you've gone through and whatever, and how you've dealt with, like, disappointment and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. And based on what you just said, you gave the thesis real well for our podcast today. And I think one of the most inflammatory, accusatory comments that has ever been perpetrated against God
yeah,
is one of these comments that sort of postures this idea that says, if God is all powerful, uh, if God is both all powerful and supremely good,
mhm,
then how do you explain the bad?
mm,
If God is all powerful and bad things happen, then he's not good. If
yeah,
God's supremely good but bad happens, then he's not all powerful. And that's what a horrifically kindergarten understanding of things, but has been perpetrated and repeated often.
sure,
So so I think this is the point. I think that innately humans sort of have a risk to benefit assessment that we make in life. What is the risk? This person says, like, uh, I was watching a deal the other day, and the guy said, the other day, my wife walked in and said, "Does this dress make me look fat?" And he goes, "How do you answer that? How do you
yeah,
answer that question?" And you make a risk to benefit assessment real quick.
mm,
And so today, we just want to start with kind of in our current environment. Today, in our news cycle, headlines are filled with talks of tariffs and economic downturn and uncertainty and instability, and we hear it, and we have to understand that what we hear affects us,
sure,
and it affects our outlook. It affects the way we think. What we hear embeds in our mind, and it embeds in our spirit, and it becomes sort of a lens that we look through. And it's hard for us sometimes to critique. This is why I believe that we have to develop, and this is so important today. We have to develop a faith and a faith perspective that helps us filter out those things that don't allow us to immediately put those glasses on. And you listen to one out of control talk show host, and the next thing you know, you've got that lens on, and you're like, "Oh, it's terrible. It is terrible. Things are going." And here's the truth, right? About what's going on, and what happens with the tariffs, and what happens with economic, and it could be economic down, inflation and recession, and all these things. And there's three things that we need to look at. Number one, some of it may be true, right? It may get tough. Number
yeah,
two, some of it may be just exaggerated for show ratings, and in the current sort of hyperbolic culture, 24-hour news cycle, and so they're going to just, everything's going to be exaggerated, everything's going to be extreme because for show ratings. Third, some of it may just be provocative rhetoric to exploit a vulnerable moment for political advantage. But
sure,
no matter the source, I think it does get in our heads and eventually into our hearts. And to me, that is a little bit of a microcosm of how easy it is for us to lean toward viewing things negatively, or viewing things with doubt, And so
Sure.
the question that we're asking today is what happens to our faith when the world feels unstable, or what do we do if hardship comes? What happens? What is our response if
Yeah.
we experience disappointment? Did God fail? I mean, how do we process that theologically? Did God let us down? Can God let you down? Or did we build expectations on something that he never promised?
Mm,
Uh, do we have a
absolutely.
you know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, right? I think that's a huge part of it that we've believed certain things that maybe are not they're not biblical centric. And this is why, as you're talking there, Ken, you're talking about like the political stuff and all of that. I think it's so important. These conversations are important because believers have to have an ability. I'm going to use the term critical thinking, but not like in the secular sense. I'm talking
right.
like from a spiritual standpoint. You
Yes.
have to be able to do some critical thinking
Yeah.
and pierce through all the junk. Because here's the deal, like politically, right? Whatever. If you're watching MSNBC, they've got an
Yeah.
agenda, and
Yep.
they're going to attempt to manipulate your emotions. They're going to communicate certain things a certain way. There's truth in some of it, but they have an agenda to manipulate it to get you to react a certain way. If you watch Fox News, they're going to present political things a
Yeah.
certain way because they
Uh-huh.
have an agenda, and their
Right.
their goal is to manipulate your emotions. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of Christians get caught up in all of that kind of stuff. And there is, depending on who's in the office and what's going on, there's like kind of the doomsday scenario and whatever. And I do think, and then not only that, but like let's talk like religiously, as you
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
things that we've believed certain things maybe that are not promised biblically, but that have been promoted, particularly in a Christian culture of prosperity teaching and
Yeah.
prosperity gospel stuff and all of that, and American Christianity that's highly built on comfort and making my life better and all that kind of stuff. So you combine all of that kind of stuff, you put it all in the bowl,
Yeah.
and bro, that's a recipe for a flawed faith perspective.
100%. Yeah, and I think that's why it's important to have this conversation today, right? Our episode title is Faith, Disappointment, and Why We Really Serve Jesus. Like it's like why do we serve Jesus? And that's I think that's the thing at the end of the day, that's the thing that we really need to dive in. And so what our I guess the big question today is what is faith? You know,
Sure.
um, and when we talk about faith, I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, but the word faith comes from the Greek word pisteuo, which means to
Yeah.
go all in or to put your complete and total trust in something. And so, and so, what when we begin to understand it from that angle, and we think, what is faith? Faith is the ability to look at something from the perspective that says, as long as I stay anchored in Jesus' parable about the wise man that built his house on the rock and the foolish man that built his house upon the sand. What is Jesus trying to communicate? He's trying to communicate a perspective that says that the home or the life or the perspective, even you say the perspective, that is going all in on him,
Hmm.
the solidity of the unshakable rock.
Yeah.
I think Jesus is addressing this very topic that we're talking about today when he's trying to explain that and by the way, if this is why, man, this is why I'm not a big proponent of trying to take biblical stories and just and just squeezing out of them things that are preach worthy but not necessarily what Jesus intended by the story. Be,
Right.
because
Right.
because you could preach about, well, Jesus is saying the rain came, the house on the house that was built on the sand fell. And so if you just keep your faith in Jesus, your bank account isn't going to collapse, your health isn't going to fail, your car's not going to break down, you're never going to have a flat tire, there's never going to be a time when you don't have the money in the bank to pay your house
Right.
note, right?
Right.
Because why? Because that's what I'm talking about, Chris, when I talk about
Yeah.
that we have every crisis of faith is the result of unmet expectations.
Yeah.
And where do our expectations come from? And I believe that our expectations, especially expectations that are unbiblical, like I just mentioned earlier when I said, I mentioned that building our expectation on something that God never promised. And sometimes we can build an expectation, like you said, the prosperity preaching, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
What happens this is in my estimation, is that people either have uninformed theology
Yeah.
or underdeveloped theology.
Right.
And so if you look at that, let's say somebody comes in and preaches a sermon that basically says, so, build your house on the rock because the house that was built on the sand fell. And that's why people, they lost their job and they lost because they weren't, well, that's not what Jesus is saying.
Yeah.
Jesus is talking about building your life on. Your life isn't going to be destroyed. Your hope isn't going to be destroyed. Your
Right.
future, and Jesus is trying to cause us to understand that if we go all in on him,
Yeah.
then we have life solidity and
Yeah.
life security. And I think that to me is central to the beginning of this conversation to arrive at a good, healthy place.
Yeah. I think you're so right. And how many people have uh walked away from the Lord, the relationship with God,
Yeah.
not because they're bad people, whatever, but because of what you said. There were some expectations. Those expectations weren't met, and and now all of a sudden, the questions and the doubt starts coming
Yeah.
in, and you made a statement, Ken, in the notes I think is so powerful. And one of the things you said, we do have notes today. So,
Hey, hey.
right? So your quote that you said is faith doesn't require answers, it requires trust.
Yeah.
Bro, that's such a powerful, powerful statement. One of the things I've said, the longer that I'm in ministry, right? So been in ministry now for 30 years. The
Yes.
longer that I've been in ministry, the longer that I'm in ministry, obviously we understand the Bible says, without faith, it's impossible to please God. We understand all of that kind of stuff. But in longevity and living for Jesus, I think the more I'm in ministry, the more I deal with people and situations, the more I'm coming to the place of seeing and believing that people typically don't fail in their walk with God because necessarily of a lack of faith,
Hmm.
but because they've lost their trust in him. And
Well, that's so
obviously
good.
faith is a part of it and whatever, but they've it's kind of like the men on the road to Emmaus, right?
Mm-hmm.
They come to a situation, we thought he
Yeah.
was the Messiah. We
Ah,
left
good point. Good point,
everything,
bro.
right?
Yeah.
We left everything to follow him. We left it all behind,
Yeah.
and he dies on this cross, and he's dead, and, like, what in the world now, you know? And one
Yeah.
of the one of the things I'll say about that should be an encouragement to us is when Jesus met them there, he didn't come with ridicule, he didn't berate them. He brought revelation and understanding that again, this is what real faith looks like,
Mm-hmm.
is that through difficulties and trials, there's a purpose, there's a plan. God, he had a plan all along, and that
Mm-hmm.
was the shedding of blood was gonna remit sins, and he was paying the price for all humanity. And once they got the right perspective, all of a sudden their joy was restored, their hope
Mm-hmm.
was renewed, and they went back and told the other disciples what God had done. And so, I think there's people listening right now, Ken, that love Jesus. They're faithful. They're trying to press through. They're trying to push through, but they're on the road and they're like, I just don't understand what
Yeah.
Jesus is doing.
Yeah. Well, I think, excuse me, I think one of the things that you said in our pre-show conversation, you mentioned about that, you have James, he's killed. And the Bible said, when they saw that it pleased the people that, they took the life of James, that they thought to take the life of Peter as well.
Right.
And then Jesus breaks into the prison, opens up the gate, and lets Peter out. you know,
Right.
and you ask the question, like you know, how how do you reconcile
How do you make sense
that?
of that?
How do you make sense of that? Like, how do you reconcile the fact that James dies and Jesus comes in and miraculously delivers Peter? I mean, did he like Peter more than James? Did James do something wrong? Was it like, sorry, James, you're just, Peter's more important? And what happens is if you don't process that correctly,
Yeah.
then what ends up happening is it will create a little fissure, a little fracture
Mhm.
in your perspective about God.
Absolutely.
Like, you would say, like, either A, taking the blame, on yourself. Well, maybe James did something. Maybe James didn't, maybe he didn't please the Lord. Maybe,
Yeah.
all of those kinds of things. And the bottom line on all that is that I believe I've personally come to a place where, we talked about this in our pre-show meeting. I've come to a place that the way I personally reconcile that is to say that God does everything he does for his glory and for the advancement of his kingdom.
Mhm.
And I think the reason why that's important for me is because it allows you to arrive at a place that says God does everything for his glory.
Yeah.
But because he is supremely good, because
Yeah.
he is good by nature, what he does for his glory will also be for our good.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the fact that that God is glorified in both of those situations. He's glorified in that James declared, his
Yeah.
devotion declared, he is worthy of my life.
Yeah.
And so in his death, he said, he's worthy of my life. That's how good God is. And that brings God glory. You said, well, yeah, but wouldn't you rather be Peter? Well, if all you're looking at is this little
There you
life
go.
sliver,
There you go.
but if you're looking today,
Yeah.
2,000 years later, you've got Peter and James that are both in the presence of the Lord. They would
Yeah.
say, Peter would say, yeah, but yeah, you know what? I mean, James got his promotion early. Like,
To be absent in body is to be present with the Lord, right? That was the faith perspective.
there it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and like you said, for his purpose, Stephen is another example.
Yeah.
Again, you start comparing these things. God delivers Peter out of the prison, and here Stephen preaches with boldness, and he's
Yeah.
not. I mean, he's just a deacon. He's just a regular
Yeah.
dude,
Yeah.
and preaches one of the most powerful sermons that ends up killing him, and the result of that, okay, so the benefit, this is the faith perspective that keeps you in those moments. The benefit is, A, to be absent in the body, to be present with the Lord, right? And there is no denying that in the early church, and I know this is a broad generalization, I'm sure there were people that wrestled with, I don't want to lose my
Yeah.
life and whatever. So I'm not making them into like some superhero things, but they did have a faith perspective that they understood that identifying with Jesus definitely meant that you're not just like, life might get a little uncomfortable for you. There's a very good chance you're going to die.
Well, you know what,
And
Chris,
they live with that.
well, and I think you bringing that up is important because I think the question is if somebody goes, well, how do you deal with that? I think the question is, well, how did the New Testament church deal with that?
Right. And you look at Stephen, and Stephen, so to be absent bodies, be present with the Lord. So he gets the benefit. There's suffering and persecution. Now he's with the Lord. But then, as you said, God gets glory. He was in Stephen's suffering. God used that suffering as an example that to speak into to Saul's life to show him that people were devoted to Jesus and committed to him and were willing to die for that cause.
Yeah. And I love how you said that. Man, I love how you said that, because I've heard it preached before,
Yeah.
and I may have even myself. But subliminally, sometimes we try to make sense of it by saying, but Stephen died and he was stoned, and out of it came Saul, and Saul became, blah, blah, blah. And here's the thing, and I'm not discounting that, but I
Yeah.
love how you said it. What you said was, what Stephen did was for the glory of God.
Yeah.
When he said he looked up into heaven, and the Bible said steadfastly the face of an angel, and he said, receive my spirit and don't lay this into their charge, and those kind of things. There was, I do believe that there was something so powerful. I do,
Yeah.
that Saul saw. And like you said, and I love how you said that, Saul saw that. Saul saw that peace in the midst of Stephen's dying,
Yeah.
and said, that's supernatural. That's not normal. That's not,
Mm.
you've seen somebody get stoned before. They're screaming and hollering, and they're like, no, don't do it, whatever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Stephen has a face of an angel, and it's extremely provocative to the spirit of Saul.
Mm.
Here's the deal. Stephen isn't doing it for Saul, and
Right. Right.
let's just be honest. We don't have to make ourselves feel better by creating some ancillary benefit, some result of this that says, but it all makes sense why God would allow something like this to happen, because in the middle of it, Saul gets saved. And we preach that kind of stuff. And I know,
Sure. Sure.
but here's the deal. But why? Why do we have to use and say, but God used it and the outcome was, I'll tell you why. Because we don't do well as humans with things that don't make sense. And so we try to make sense out of it. Here's the only way we need to make sense out of it. Stephen was fully and completely devoted to Jesus Christ. When he saw the heavens opened and saw Jesus seated at the right hand of the Majesty on high, he understood that he was getting ready to receive him. And Stephen was like, I am only one breath away from receiving my eternal reward. And in this, he chose to glorify Jesus. The effect that it had on Saul and the people around, we don't discount that. But you don't have to create some kind of this thing that
Yes.
says, but the reason why God allowed this thing to happen, I know it's bad and it doesn't make sense, but God was working this bigger work. No, stop. No,
Right.
it had an effect. It had a benefit. It was a testimony. But in the end, Stephen didn't die so that Saul could be saved. Stephen died because
Ooh,
his eternal hope was Jesus Christ.
man, that's so good, bro. That's so good. Yeah, there's no way that Stephen had any knowledge of any of that. He didn't do that for any other reason but because of his devotion to Jesus. And that perspective for us is so critical. Who's so again, not doing it for the result of other people, but our faith perspective should produce that kind of response in us
Yeah.
that doesn't produce a frantic,
Yeah.
fear, like, "Oh, what's going on?" What like, that devotion to us or in us should be so it should be in us that our devotion is so strong that we're like, "Man, it doesn't matter what happens, it doesn't matter what comes,
Yeah.
we're gonna serve
Mhm.
God." Here's one of the things I think that is a challenge for us in the modern context
Okay.
is that clearly was suffering for the name of Jesus.
100%.
In the modern context, I lose my job. I get cancer.
God failed me.
Something like, right? There's no clear correlation between those experiences and my relationship with God. So talk to us about maybe how we like, okay, great.
That's
Because
a great
Stephen,
question. That's it. No, that's a great question.
so yeah,
That's powerful. That's a great question. No, I see where you're going with that.
okay.
No, so what you're saying is Stephen's standing there, he preaches a message and glorifies God, and it's clearly spiritual and it's clearly like,
Well, and
I
his
mean,
suffering is the
recorded in
byproduct.
scripture and
Yeah, and his suffering is the byproduct of his ministry, what he was doing, his preaching, all of that the suffering that he went through was the byproduct of that. Me losing
okay.
my job is not necessarily the byproduct of, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not
Yeah.
clearly identified. I got fired or I lost my job or I got cancer because I'm a
Okay.
follower of Jesus.
Okay. Well, let's see if we can make it. Let's see if we can make it connect. Let's see if we can let's see if we can lay a theological framework
Yeah,
that makes it where, me losing my job, even though okay, so
and I
okay,
have lost
so
my job, by the way, so this
yeah.
is
So
I can relate to
let's
this.
start with okay, so let's start with okay, it's easy to say that Stephen did what he did for the cause of Christ.
Yeah,
And so what you're saying is, but what's the connection when you say life threw me a curveball? I got sick. I lost my job. Things didn't go the way that I'd prayed or
yeah,
hoped,
yeah,
etc. So what you're saying is there a cause of Christ in that? Or that's the question we need to ask. So
yeah,
so it's obvious that Stephen gives himself for the cause of Christ. But the question is, what is Stephen's role in the cause of Christ? Stephen's role goes back to those two things that I believe that are foundational.
yeah,
Everything that God does, he does for his glory and for the advancement of his kingdom.
yeah,
And what God does for his glory, he does for our good,
yeah,
right? Anything that gives God glory that we're a
yeah,
part of ultimately is for our good. So so in John, John 17, I believe it is, Jesus is saying to, I guess in front of the disciples, he's saying, Father, I've glorified your name. Now glorify me. I've given my life to glorify you. Now I'm praying that you glorify me. And this is a prayer that, in a standalone context, maybe not doesn't make a lot of sense. But in Philippians chapter 2, the Bible says, Paul says, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation and took on the form of a servant for the very explicit cause of the suffering of death." And because he died, because he was faithful to that end,
yeah,
God has also highly exalted him and given him a name that is above every name. I believe that Paul is speaking to the answered prayer of Jesus' John 17 prayer. Now glorify me.
mm-hmm,
I've glorified you. Now glorify me. Wherein does God glorify him? He raises him from the dead and gives him a name above every name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow, every tongue confess, etc. Okay. He's Lord over all. All things belong to him. The
yeah,
Bible says everything's been given to me.
yeah,
So, okay. So here's how I would sort of answer that. If we look at everything being done for the glory of God and for the advancement of his kingdom, then I would say, yes, Stephen's death was directly connected to the work of God or the cause of Christ. But if the cause of Christ ultimately settles in this idea of the glorification of Jesus Christ,
yeah,
the glorification of God in his excellence and whatever, which is our worship, then how then can we in sickness glorify him? How then in our job loss do
yeah,
we bring glory to him? And in that way, what is explicitly the cause of Christ for Stephen is implicitly the cause of Christ in our faith orientation to life struggles and trials.
man, that's so good. That's so good. Right, and I think you have to frame it in that way. I was preaching, Ken, I was preaching, at Lighthouse on Sunday,
Uh-huh.
and I was talking about worship, I was talking about praise, and I told the story of Raynell Smith, my
Yes.
first my first
Wow.
Sunday school teacher, right?
Mm.
11 years old, not had no desire, 0, less than 0 desire to
Yeah.
be in a
Like,
Sunday school class,
yeah.
less desire l 0 desire to be in church, had no desire of any of it. I caused all kinds of problems in our class. I was throwing spit wads, I was pulling chairs out from under kids, like, I was a it was a train wreck. What I didn't know is that Raynell Smith was teaching 11 and 12-year-old boys, and her body was riddled with cancer at the time. Like,
Yeah.
literally, she would only live a few months of us
Yeah.
kinda being there. And but I was telling the story, we would come out of Sunday school class and go into worship, and I remember very vividly, like, it's just emblazoned in my brain of coming out of class, and there were multiple services where before the service, would really even get kicked off, Linda Rice would start playing a little something on the piano, and before it even get kicked off, Raynell Smith would step out of her pew, get a little hanky, and she'd just walk up and down the middle aisle, not very fast, just whatever, and just worshiping God, right? And again, she would only live another
Yeah.
few months after that. She didn't live very
Yeah.
long after that. I didn't know her very long. But here I am 40 years later, preaching and teaching and talking about somebody who modeled and exampled
Bro.
that even in those even in, the horrible doctor's reports and physical frailty and all the things, her life said, I'm gonna bring God glory. My life is going to bring God glory.
Right.
And I'm preaching about it 40 years later, right?
Yeah.
She had no
Yeah.
idea. There's no way
Yeah.
she would ever know that.
Here's her
So
name
it
mentioned in our podcast today.
and it goes to your point of what you're saying, like, there's those 2 reasons of why God does what he does. She didn't do it for being mentioned on this podcast or in sermons or whatever.
Yes.
She
Yes.
did
Yes.
it because
Yes.
her life was an expression of her devotion, and out of that expression of devotion, God received the glory. So what would
Yeah.
happen if we started framing the loss of a job, but we walked through it and said, "You know what? My devotion, my faith is unwavering because he's gonna get the glory out of it." And here's what all of us know, Ken. What's so hard in the moment is all of us know if you just keep your faith long enough, you'll be able to look back and be like, "Oh, that's what God was doing. God was
Mhm.
working. He was moving. He was changing things in me. He was working things out. He was putting me in the right spot, in the right
Yeah.
position, and whatever." And so the question is, how do we get to that place? How do we get to that place of a Raynell Smith when your body is so frail and fragile and you still say, "I want my life to bring glory and honor to him."
Man, I think we have to, I really think we have to start by rebuking that folk theology that comes from that
Uh-oh, here
same,
we go. Here we
from,
go.
yeah, from that same source that you talked about earlier about, about, um, yeah, prosperity preaching.
Yeah,
Um, there has been from the charismatic movement, there's been this stupid, ridiculous, stupid,
false.
dumb, false teaching
Yeah,
that God always wants to heal always. And that if God doesn't heal, then somehow there was a breakdown. And I've talked to people like that. And I'm like, are like, and I don't want to be like, like you're dumb, bro. Like, because I think that people have been misinformed, and I believe they've got underdeveloped theology, and I
yeah,
believe that and I believe that I think sometimes it's a hopeful thing. Like it's
sure,
like, we want to believe that, that that when we get sick, we want to believe that it's part of padding our faith.
sure.
It's like padding our faith to say, that this sickness isn't going to produce an outcome that will take me away from my family, or whatever, because we don't want, because what do is we do everything to protect the continuity of our comfort.
Sure. Absolutely.
Our peace,
Absolutely.
our peace is established on predictable continuity.
I feel a sermon coming on.
Dude, that is good. It is, right. Our peace is built off of predictable continuity. And so we say,
100%.
I have an expected outcome. I can expect this outcome because da 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 da. And so what we say is, okay, so then I have security and I have peace because
Yeah.
I have this continuity of outcome. Well, we have a scripture that says, take no thought for what you'll wear, what you'll eat, where you live, which means don't take a thought about where you're going to work,
Right.
because God knows that you have need of these things.
Yeah.
So you're like, so do you have unbelief in that area? Or is it a place where you have underdeveloped faith that says, not necessarily any of that? Like, I do believe that.
Yeah.
I believe God's going to take care of us. I believe, okay, well then why the fretting? Because I am geared and wired as a human. My brain is wired neurologically. I mean, you
Sure.
watch the same master class that I did.
Yeah.
Our brains are wired for predictability.
Absolutely.
When we go into REM sleep, neurologists have found that in REM sleep, our brains are ordering the events of the day. Here's that weird stuff that you said, that the our brains are ordering the events of the day and pulling out files and cataloging those files and connecting them to previous experiences so that
Yeah.
the brain can more efficiently predict outcomes for the future.
Right. It's all the while analyzing and evaluating the senses to predict so that it can get ahead of it, produce hormones and chemicals and all the different things so that you can
Yes,
function and operate it. It's all based on predictability
bro.
to
Remember they
protect
said
yourself, right? It's all the fight
exactly.
or flight stuff.
Yeah. And so do you remember they said that it actually takes 20 minutes for the if you drink a glass of water, it takes 20 minutes for your thirst to actually be satiated by getting into your bloodstream and affecting the dehydration and whatever it takes. That's a 20-minute process.
Yeah.
You drink a glass of water and all of a sudden you feel satisfied. You know why? Because the vagus nerve is sending a signal to your brain, and it's causing your brain to create a predictive outcome because it's experienced it over and over. And so your brain actually sends a signal to your body that is 20 minutes away.
Wow. That's wild. That is wild, bro.
Okay. So here's what happens. So, and I mean, bro, this is neurology.
Right.
Here's what we do. Yes, I believe that he's going to work this out. Yes, I believe that he said, I do believe the scripture that says that we have to take no thought for what you'll wear and what you'll eat and what their Father in heaven knows you have need of these things, that God's going to provide. I do believe that. But I also am dealing with these runaway thoughts and emotions where my brain is trying to predict the outcome of this.
Yeah.
And I need daily struggles.
Mhm.
I need micro adjustments that help embed in my thinking faith outcomes. I
Mm.
I need a stressor today. One of the reasons why we need exercise is because our body needs to be put under stress
Sure.
so that our body can actually respond in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And so I need a little trial today. I need a little struggle today. I need a little something that challenges my faith today. Why? So that when I come to the final exam, my
Yes.
brain and my emotions don't run away with all of these things that's like, well, what if, what if, what if, what if? And I'm sitting here and my brain is, how do you settle into faith? And I believe that's why the Bible said he scourges every son that he receives and he
Yeah.
chastens those that are his.
Yeah.
And the Bible, right? Why? So that God knows the creator of our brain and the creator of our soul and our spirit understands how that we're what's going to have to happen for us to be able to stand like Stephen stood or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who make one of the most balanced faith statements in history.
Right.
If he saves us from the fire, he's worthy of our devotion. If we die in the fire, he's worthy of our devotion. Either way, he has our life and we're going to glorify God in this. We're either going to
Yeah.
glorify God by walking out of the fire or we're going to glorify God by our bones being carried out of the fire. Either way, we're going to declare that God is worthy.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about, like, we need the trial, we need those situations, because what happens is it wires you, like, neurologically, that so we crave the predictability. We wanna know that, like, the outcome's gonna whatever, and the
Mhm.
reality. Here's the reality. We
Yeah,
live in an unstable world.
that's it.
As much as you crave the predictability, you can't really predict or control anything, but the one thing that you can predict and control is God's faithfulness.
Hello.
You go through stuff.
Because it's unchanging. Uh, the same yesterday, today,
Bro,
and forever.
bro, it never changes, and so if you can condition your faith that says, I can't control today's outcome, but when the bad things come, you're gonna feel. That's the thing, is like, we're nobody's saying you have to be like superhuman and you're not gonna feel. Again, the whole conversation, just because you feel anxious doesn't mean you have anxiety. You're gonna feel some anxiousness. You're going to feel
It's a
fear from time to
normal
time.
response. That's a
Normal
normal response.
responses. Those things happen. But once you process through that, your faith perspective should produce, I'm going through this, but God. I know this has happened, but God is going to take. That's the predictable outcome that you can count on every single time. Romans 8:28. My predictable outcome is all things are some way, somehow going to work together for good to them that love God and are the called according to his purpose. Going back to your
All
points, for
for
him
all for
glory
his glory and for advancement of his kingdom.
we're up against the clock just a little bit. So I want you to, I want to maybe finish on this, because I think this
Let's
is a
go.
really important thing.
Let's
And
go.
that is one of the things I think that we have lost in modern Christianity
Okay.
is the appreciation for the eternal.
Mhm.
And I don't want to pretend like I know the answers of why. But and again, this is not a glorification of anything, but the early days of Pentecost, there was
Mhm.
so much persecution and so much suffering. If you read the hymns, if you read, the old songs, a lot of it was, you know, a look towards eternal things,
Okay. Let's go.
right?
So let's go to all right. So let's go to exercise.
Yeah.
Let's go to exercise. If you if you lived in 1850 and
Mhm.
worked on a farm,
Mhm.
you probably didn't need a workout plan.
There were no Planet Fitnesses in 1850?
There were none.
What? I'm
Let me see,
shocked. Hey, speaking of which, I saw a reel yesterday, and it was farmers versus bodybuilders in arm wrestling.
Doc. That's why
Guess
I
who
said
won?
hey, the hay balers.
Farmers absolutely kicked the snot out of him. It wasn't
Right.
even close.
Yeah, because it's more natural brute strength. And that's the thing, okay? Farmers 1800s, 1850s, they're working their tail end off. What was
Yeah.
their workout? Their workout was life. That's
Right.
their workout. What's your workout plan, bro? It's like, yeah, like it's baling hay, it's getting up in the morning, it's, milking cows, carrying, you know, 5 gallon, 5 gallon milk. It's 40 pounds. You
Yeah.
carry the 5 gallon milk jugs and you're carrying those one in each hand. That's 40 pounds, and so, okay. But what doesn't come naturally through life requires a disciplined plan.
Okay.
If you're not baling hay, you're probably going to need to do bench presses.
Yeah.
So either bale hay or bench press. Bale hay is the life experience component.
Yeah.
Bench press is the spiritual discipline component.
So good, bro. I love the analogy. I love
If
this.
if we don't have, if we don't, it's in all of the things that mind mapping makes me deficient in. Here's one benefit, but it, but here's the thing: if your life situation causes you to say, "I don't want to stay here," you don't have to have a deeply
Yes.
regimented spiritual discipline plan that
Yes.
that journals and walks through what God revealed, and talks about, that I need to remember, I need to remind myself that this world is not my home. I need to, I need to do it in worship. I need to so like, uh, in a spiritual disciplines class, in, let's say, for example, you're doing a master's degree program, you have a spiritual disciplines class, and so they're gonna say, okay, so today what you need to do is you need to focus on, I need to keep my mind on the eternal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find two worship songs. One I'm going to begin with, and it's going to talk about eternity and heaven, and
Yeah.
one I'm going to end with. I'm going to bookend my time, and then I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to spend some time in study. And then I'm going to spend some time journaling what this means to me. And then I'm going to pray some more. And then I'm going to listen to that last worship song. That should take about an hour. And that is a spiritual disciplines plan to frame my thinking
Mm-hmm.
that this world is not my home.
Yeah.
If I am living in the Ukraine, or if
Right.
I'm living in war-torn Uganda or Congo,
Yeah.
I don't I don't need to have a
Right.
1 hour plan where I sit down to remind me that my hope is beyond this world. And so Lord, give me that precious balance between the two.
So
Abraham
good, man.
Abraham ended up with at this place where he said that he didn't build a city for his namesake.
Mm-hmm.
The question was, why? Well, if Abraham was so great and Abraham was so amazing, then why is there not a city with his name on it these days? And the scripture answers that. Why didn't Abraham build a city for his name's sake so that today we could go to Abraham in the Middle East somewhere?
Yeah.
And here's why the Bible says it: because he came to the conclusion, he made a decision through the result of his life experiences that here we have no continuing city. He sought one with foundations whose builder and maker was God.
Yeah.
I can build a city, but it will turn to rubble, and I
Yeah.
don't want my name on it anyway. And so Abraham lives as a sojourner and a pilgrim because he was looking for an eternal city whose name on it was the one he worshiped.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. And that's gotta be the mindset of every spirit-filled believer, right?
Right. Right.
And those are things, and I love what you said, the spiritual discipline, we've gotta do that. We do have life struggles, and we do have difficulties.
Yeah.
In comparison, to others in the rest of the world, it may not be,
Mhm.
like, it may not be at the same level, but still, you have somebody you love gets diagnosed with cancer, or you get in financial trouble, like, it's the same deal, it's the same suffering.
Can I pause you right here?
Yeah,
That's why I said, Chris, that Lord, give me some daily struggles
yeah,
that I can have some micro adjustments so that when those big things happen, I don't want that to be the first time that I've wrestled with this.
yeah,
I want something to happen today that I've got to wrestle through and that challenges me today, so that if I when I do face that, I have at least the foundation that the predictable outcome will be that I'm going to stay anchored to him.
yeah. So real quick, it reminds me of the story. Friend of mine, his grandfather was basically dying. He had a heart condition, And so the family's in his room and they're waiting to hear from the doctor, like, what's the plan? What's going to happen? Whatever. And it's a very serious situation. Doctor comes in and he looks at the family and they said, they asked him, like, what's the report, whatever. And he looked at him. This is a true story. He looked at him and said, I'm sorry, but he's going to die. And they were like shocked. And then they were like angry. Like, what are you talking about? Like, there's got to be something that can happen. Got to be something we do. And here's what he said. He said, he doesn't have to. There are things that can be done, but he said, I've dealt with him long enough to know that all the things that his lifestyle is producing, he's not willing to change. And if he's not willing to change, then the result is he is going to die. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he will die from this condition because he won't make the lifestyle changes. Here's the reality, Ken. There are things that all of us know that we need to do. We need to change lifestyle changes, whatever. But most of the time we don't do it until something in life forces our hand, until something presses in on us. And then all of a sudden we're like, okay, now we need to do this. We need to make this happen. So those things that can happen that produce the change in us that we need are really God's gifts. And I think one of those gifts, the pain that we go through and the difficulties, one of the things that it produces, the gift that it gives us, is severing our affection to this world.
100%.
Separating our hope in all of the things in the American dream. And
what a gift. What a gift. What a gift.
And separating that so that we can truly, here's the deal. We know it intellectually. We know to live as Christ, to die as gain, but we don't feel it. And the struggles and the challenges and all of those different things should produce in us the hope that says, man, it's not about this world. As long as I'm here, I'm going to bring glory to God. I want my life to bring glory and honor to him. But the moment he decides that it's time, I'm ready to be in his presence forever. And that perspective has to grip us. That has to be, Ken, at the core of our faith.
Yeah. Yeah. And in this context, our spiritual disciplines are making decisions to do what life is not naturally producing in us.
Sure.
So, so today, today, if you're in a situation or circumstance right now, you're in a tough spot. If you're sitting here today and you're saying, well, I tithe, but my finances didn't improve, or I prayed, but the healing didn't come, or I served, but I'm still, getting overlooked. Maybe another form of disappointment, right?
Sure.
Maybe what we do today is we sit down and say, look, I'm going to spend some time in prayer and I'm going to let this tension point kind of hit me, which is, maybe this isn't about getting what I want.
Yeah.
Maybe it's about becoming who he wants.
Right.
And there will be a day, just tell yourself, there will be a day that I will be happy that I didn't get what I want.
Yeah.
There'll be a day.
Absolutely.
That I'm happy that I let him frame me into the person he wants. We've said it before, Chris. The wedding garment is one size fits all, or all size fits one, not one size fits all.
Yeah.
And the one is the fullness of the measure of the stature of Christ. God doesn't tailor the wedding garment to match us. Right. God tailors us to match the wedding garment because it's already tailored to the fullness of the measure of Christ. So let Christ be formed in you.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. Read just a couple of quick comments to close it out here today. Jason Rodriguez, the God that created the garden also put the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We can have faith in him as the creator, but we can trust him that he's not withholding his best from us. I think that's so powerful. And then Aaron Thornton, great point. He said, walking by faith is activating your trust in Jesus. Praise when you don't see answers. Pray when you don't believe, and trust when you don't understand. Obedience to faith will lead to revelation of Jesus, then flows his grace to us. Great comments today. Man, I think this is huge, dude. This conversation is so huge.
I agree.
This is the center of all of it. So
I agree.
We appreciate everybody being on today, even a couple of knuckleheads on YouTube. but, they got the quick block, so we got rid of them real quick, but, it's all good. It's all good. That's what happens sometimes. So we do appreciate, all the, discussion, interaction, conversation today. Hopefully, this is a conversation that helps you and bless you, and if you know somebody going through a difficult time, man, I would encourage you when this comes out or send them the link from Facebook or YouTube and just share this with them about how we can uh, posture our faith in the right way that breeds hope and brings glory and honor to God. So thank you for being a part of the conversation. We look forward to coming back to you next Tuesday around